Intelligence Task Force meeting for September. We'll go ahead and have a roll call.
Senator Nemes, Senator Rawlings,
Present.
Senator Thomas, Senator Williams,
Here.
Representative Lehman,
Here.
Representative Lewis,
Here.
Representative Miles, Representative Payne, Co-Chair Bray, Chair Mays Bledsoe.
Present. All right, seeing we have a quorum, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes from the August 14th meeting.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you. All those approved, please say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Thank you very much for that. We have a really exciting agenda this morning. We've been focusing so far kind of on the internal conversations of AI, and today we're going to have an external conversation about AI. And first up is artificial intelligence in the retail sector, and they're joining us online, I believe, this morning. Do I see Caroline and Mercy? There you both are. Good morning. If you'll please introduce yourselves, and you may have the floor for a presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Bledsoe and the members of the AI Task Force for having us. We're sorry we can't be there in Frankfurt with you all today, but we hope to visit you all soon. My name is Mercy Beeler. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations here at National Retail Federation. The National Retail Federation, if you all don't know, is a trade association that represents both small and large businesses across the United States. We represent small mom and pop Main Street and also large businesses like your big box retailers. We employ 52 million jobs, and we are the largest private sector employer. I want to thank Shannon from the Kentucky Retailers also for welcoming us and giving us the opportunity. And I'll kick it off to my colleague, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Mercy, and thank you so much to the task force again for having us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have a short presentation for you all to walk through some of the use cases in the retail sector. And of course, we very much welcome any questions throughout the process, but I'll be sure to leave time for Q&A at the end as well. So can everyone see my screen just first off? Perfect. Thank you so much. So like Mercy said, my name is Caroline Ruppert. I am the Director of AI and Technology Policy, as well as the Associate Director of the Center for Digital Risk and Innovation at the National Retail Federation. So just to kind of run through what we're going to talk about today, first, we'll talk about NRF. We'll walk through some of the retail use cases and how the retail sector is using AI. We also want to highlight some of the principles that we've developed for our member companies for the responsible use of AI in the retail sector, and then close out with some policy considerations for you all to discuss. So like Mercy said, NRF is the largest trade association representing the retail sector. We represent everyone from the biggest of the big retailers all the way down to mom and pop stores. We also have close relationships with our state retail associations. So like Mercy said, thank you to Shannon at the Kentucky Retailer Federation for setting this up. Just to give you a bit of context about the Center for Digital Risk and Innovation. So we are really the research and the writing arm of NRF when it comes to key technology issues. So we develop guidelines, recommendations for best practices, things of that nature, specifically related to AI, cybersecurity, and fraud prevention. So to give you some context for how retail has used AI in the past, even though it seems like AI is, this big new fancy thing that has popped up only recently, retailers have been using AI for quite a while. And then really just as the technology has grown and developed and changed over time, likewise, the deployment of the technology has grown and developed and changed over time. So especially over the last 3 years. Retail, while we tend to think of, software, IT companies, the tech industry, when it comes to the deployment of AI, retailers are one of the biggest deployers of AI. We're among the top 3, second to financial services sector, and then along with the software and IT sector. So retail really has invested a lot in this technology over the years. And, we're very excited about where it's heading. Yeah, very, very excited to be here to talk about some of the policy implications of the deployment. So AI tools really are integrated into a wide swath of different instances when it comes to retail. And ultimately, the goal of any of the deployment of these tools is to enhance the customer experience as well as the employee experience. So when we talk about some of the specific use cases, I tend to think about them in three buckets: consumer facing, employee facing, and internal use cases. So the consumer facing use cases are probably the ones that we all as customers ourselves think of first when we think about how AI is used in the retail sector. Things like customer service chatbots, auto-generated product descriptions and marketing tools, things like that, that we as consumers have interaction with. But I think where some of the really interesting use cases happen is on the employee and the internal facing side of things. So one of the use cases that we've seen pop up over the last few years has been this use of company-specific Gen AI apps for store employees. So this is a really good example of AI being used to empower employees. So the specific example, in this case, would be a retailer who has their own app for employee use is now trained on the employee manual. So retailers, historically a very seasonal business, sometimes short-term, lots of short-term employees, especially around those seasonal high points. If a customer walks into the store and has a specific question and the employee doesn't know the answer to it, instead of calling over the manager to assist the customer, employees now have the opportunity to use almost like a ChatGPT-esque app that, again, is trained on their employee manual to ask the question that the customer has, give an accurate answer, and then the customer can go on about their day. The employee can go on to their next task, and the manager can continue using their time in other ways. So it really gets at this idea of AI being used to enhance the customer experience and enhance the employee experience as well. We also are seeing retailers use AI for HR and benefits related applications. Generally speaking, retail tends to employ or deploy AI in low risk use cases. The HR and benefits related applications is the one notable exception to that. Obviously, AI, applied in these sorts of circumstances is a high risk consideration, but that's really the one that kind of stands out among the rest of the other retailer deployments. And then, of course, employee upskilling and reskilling is very important to the retail sector as well. When it comes to some of the internal use cases, we've really seen AI play a really useful role when it comes to supply chain forecasting, inventory planning, things like that. Obviously the trade market at the moment is, a bit unpredictable. So it's been helpful for our retailers to have additional tools, such as AI-powered tools in these circumstances to help them navigate, their inventory management processes. We also have seen some interesting applications when it comes to enhanced fraud detection and prevention measures, both in terms of being able to detect fraud patterns potentially earlier than otherwise possible, or also in a cybersecurity sense as well. And then, of course, coding and application development as well. Now, given these use cases, a few years ago, NRF developed principles for the use of the responsible use of AI in the retail sector. And these were meant to be guidelines for our member companies as they were just starting to think seriously about some of these, bigger deployments of AI-powered tools. So we really broke these principles into four different categories. governance and risk management, customer engagement and trust, workforce applications and use, and then business partner accountability. I will warn you, there's a lot of text on these upcoming slides. I'm happy to circulate these afterwards so you can take a read through them, but I'll just walk you through some of the highlights. So starting off with the governance and risk management piece, we wanted to make sure that retailers are deploying strong internal governance of AI tools, especially when it comes to managing risks and ensuring that these tools are delivering the expected benefits. We actually just fielded a survey of our members on that focused a significant amount on AI governance and risk management and kind of how this process is going. We're in the process of going through the data, and we expect the report to be released publicly probably mid-October. So this is something that's really important to us, really important to our members, and I'm happy to follow up with the task force once that report has been concluded and released. Next up, we have the customer engagement component. So we want to make sure that retailers are transparent about their uses of AI, especially those that have an effect on the customer. Retail is one of those industries where customer trust is our bread and butter. It is a highly competitive industry with low friction. So if a customer doesn't have a good relationship with a retailer, it's pretty easy for them to just choose to go and shop elsewhere. It's not quite like financial services or, the insurance sector where it's very, very difficult to transfer your services from one to another. But with retail, that's not the case. So, customer support and trust is always at the center of our industry, and making sure that we are clear and transparent about where we're using these tools is very important to us. So these points kind of get at a similar idea of focusing on that consumer trust, ensuring that these tools are enhancing the customer experience, and we don't want to undermine that trust at all. And making sure that any AI-enabled technology, is compliant with existing laws on the books. One of the interesting but sometimes complicated pieces of AI policy, as I know you all are very well aware, is because of how far-reaching it is and these tools can be, the number of existing laws and regulations that already can regulate AI tools. There are a lot of them out there. So making sure that any laws, any of these tools that occupy a digital space are in compliance with any existing laws, whether they were originally meant to regulate a digital space or not. That's very important to our members as well. Next up, we have our workforce applications and use cases. So we want to make sure that retailers engage in ongoing oversight and review of any of these applications. Like I said, this is one of the few high-risk use cases that retailers use AI for. So we want to make sure that there is a level of transparency when it comes to how retailers are using these tools in relation to their workforce. And again, going back to a similar idea of making sure that any of these tools are deployed in compliance with any existing laws on the books, such as anti-discrimination laws, things of that nature. And then lastly, we have our business partner accountability. So generally, retailers occupy a deployer space in the industry. There are a few exceptions for retailers who are actively developing their own tools, but for the vast majority of these use cases, retailers are purchasing an AI-powered tool from a from a developer company and not making substantial modifications to that tool and using it as is. So making sure that those contracts, that business partner accountability is strong and there's a good level of transparency and clear guidelines and expectations established between the retailer and any third party that they are purchasing these tools from is very important, again, especially when we're talking about some of the high-risk use cases. Now, I want to close out with some policy-related considerations for you all. Obviously, you guys are very in the weeds on this, so this is really just a high-level look at how we are approaching the AI policy debate or how we look at these issues. I think one of the first things to start with is, and one of the things that makes the AI policy debate unique, especially to things like privacy and cybersecurity, is that in those instances, you really are just protecting from a harm being done. Whereas with AI, yes, you have that overlap with risk mitigation and privacy, making sure that data is protected. But there is also this other arm to it that these tools do present this incredible innovative potential. So how you thread that needle is an important, I think, way to frame the conversation, as opposed to just lumping it in with privacy protections, things like that. The way we tend to approach the policy-related considerations as well, we really take a tiered obligation approach when it comes to risk. So, anything that has that is making a consequential decision, things related to hiring and HR-related decisions, healthcare decisions, financial, mortgage approval, rent approval, those sorts of things that have these huge implications for, really the rest of your life. We think that, those all qualify as high risk considerations and should be kind of the first targets for any sort of AI regulation or policy. We also are pretty concerned about the business impacts of policy fragmentation. So one of the things that we've seen is, in the past with previous policy debates, is if there's a regulatory environment created that essentially only the biggest tech companies can afford to comply with, that ultimately ends up starving out this startup culture and reducing competition on the developer end, which then raises prices on the deployer side of things. So AI presents this really unique opportunity for the retail sector that a retailer of any size can use these types of tools to scale their business. And if only the biggest tech companies can afford to comply with a certain policy regime or regulatory environment, that's going to starve out some of those that competitiveness within the tech sector and therefore have trickle-down effects on the deployer side of things. Now, as I mentioned, I also think it's worth exploring existing regulations, seeing where the holes are in or clarification is needed to highlight that existing regulations do, in fact, carry over to the digital space. I think without kind of going through that exercise first, it becomes very difficult to see where exactly we need to patch things. So my understanding is that, you all are going through that process currently, and I really commend the work of this body for taking that investment, because I know it is a difficult undertaking, to say the least. Next up, we also feel strongly that the responsibilities between developers and deployers need to be very, very clear. The way we tend to think about it is a substantial modification standard. So if a body that is typically a deployer purchases a tool and starts making substantial modifications to it, then they're no longer just a deployer, right? At that point, you have kind of bridged the gap into the developer territory, but making sure that those roles and responsibilities are clearly defined in any legislation or regulation is really important for us. Obviously, any policy, rulemaking process, right, legislation process is, can be lengthy and difficult. So, in the meantime, encouraging voluntary standards for AI governance and risk management is another potential option to consider, especially in an industry like retail, where, like I said, our business is really based on consumer trust. We tend to see pretty high adoption rates of voluntary risk management standards within the retail sector, because again, we want to show that good faith effort that we're complying with these AI governance standards, and this is something that is the forefront of our mind. And then lastly, obviously, as Mercy mentioned, retailers are a huge employer within the economy. So incentives for upskilling and reskilling workers is something to consider as well. We saw some interesting ideas come out of the AI action plan at the federal level back in July in terms of some of the tax incentives for upskilling and reskilling. And I think that could be something interesting to explore at the state level as well. So with that, here are some links to both the center, the work that we've done, and the principles that we've released. And I'm happy to circulate this deck afterwards for more of an in-depth view. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And we do have a few brief questions, so I'll start with Representative Lehman.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the presenters today. One topic I'd like to ask about, I don't think you really addressed, was this idea of dynamic pricing or the ability of retailers to change price based on any number of factors. Does the Federation have guidance on this? And could you talk a little bit more which of your members are using this? What types of data are they using to inform dynamic pricing? Could you just address that a little bit more?
Yeah, happy to. Mercy, are you available?
Hi there. Sorry about that. I was trying to get myself off of mute and off the video. Thank you so much, Representative Lamb, for that question. We can definitely explain the dynamic pricing. Our retailers are obviously focused on consumer first. So the dynamic pricing, it goes with the preference of the retailers. There's no specific targeting of consumers based off the pricing that they are. But we are happy if you're seeing use cases on that, we're happy to take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate some follow-up, and what are the use cases of that? Thank you.
Any other questions? That was a good one. Conversation. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think that balance between freedom and innovation and responsibility is one that we're leaning into on the government side and on the private side. So we appreciate you coming in and sharing a few of your thoughts.
Of course, and thank you again to the task force for the time, and happy to follow up with any additional questions that may pop up over email.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda is a follow-up to the conversation we started last month about energy policy and the use of data centers and how much energy they consume. And so we have with us today Bartlett Cleland from Strategic Initiatives at Net Choice. Welcome, sir. If you'll just introduce yourself and begin your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Likewise, I'm sorry I truly am sorry I can't be there today. As you can see, I'm in a hotel room, and it'd be much more fun to be there with you guys in person. I am Bartlett Cleland. I'm General Counsel for Net Choice. We are a trade association, a little bit different than most trade associations that you interact with or hear about. We are a organization that comes from a point of principle. So we are dedicated to free enterprise and free speech online, and our members know that as they join. So all of my testimony should be seen through that lens of free enterprise. And with that, let me try to go to slides, and you will see how technologically capable I am, which might prove to be not awesome. And I even practiced this, and I'm so sorry for taking your time while I try to figure this out. There we go. Okay. Do you see my slide? Hopefully. Okay, good deal. All right. And these may have been circulated, and so you can follow right along. Um, but here we go. Same information I just gave you. Um, and I will go to the next. There we go. So I want to talk a minute about the demand for, well, actually, let me back up. So data centers, as I've listened to some of the previous hearings, and so understand a little bit where you guys are. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on things you already know and already clearly understand. So I'll just hit the highlights. But AI doesn't run in a magic place. It runs largely in data centers. And data centers and the use of AI generally, of course, takes electricity. For those of you who are, let's say, 30, 35, or older, you'll remember in any office you worked in that down the hall there was a closet. And in that closet was a rack, a large metal uh, skeleton that had a bunch of computers on it. And every now and then, an IT guy or gal would go in there, do things, and your computer would work better or worse depending on what they did. The data center is a whole bunch of those racks moved outside the office. So gaining tons of efficiency, lower cost for companies, et cetera, and actually a lot less electricity usage than if we all went backwards 5 to 10 years and started putting those exact same servers in our individual closets in our individual offices. The demand, as then you can understand, is merely for the cloud, called cloud computing. And that is to say, computation that's happening over there, as opposed to on my laptop or on my phone. So there is no difference between the cloud and essentially just using your computer, as long as you are actually doing the processing and storage elsewhere. Obviously, some laptops, some phones have some capacity to store and some capacity for compute, but a lot of what we do these days happens elsewhere, including presentation we just heard of any kind of retail. You are actually operating elsewhere with what you're buying, credit cards being approved, et cetera. That is the visuals that you're getting, the computation for those visuals being delivered to you on your phone. It's exactly what's happening. It's being delivered to you on your phone. You are not going to it, as we kind of say in language these days. So, what does AI mean? So, we've had this uptick in electricity usage for years, and it has been relatively steady over 20 years, certainly in 10 years. With the advent of AI, we see an increase of what compute will take for electricity. That means that the trend line, a static trend line, is now going to be a little bit higher. And that's before we get to any new efficiencies and et cetera. However, I'm sorry, electricity usage has been a long-term trend for growth of the economy. And so there are a lot of reasons to believe and to observe that electricity is merely an input into economic success. Along those lines, we've heard from the national level that because AI requires higher amount of electricity usage, even more data center usage, that we should be investing in these areas. So in the infrastructure in our country, and the one reason, I think there are a lot of reasons, but one reason that caught the attention in Washington, D.C. is not only so we can increase our national productivity, our national output, but also so that we can beat China, who, as a country, is very much racing to beat us in the development, the deployment, and use of AI. And to do that, they are also building a lot of data centers because they want them in their country. All right, so here is a representation, a visual to show you why the trend line has been increasing on use of um, electricity and use of data in general. Here's a typical set of apps from a phone. If you pull out your phone and look at all your apps, every one of those apps takes electricity to use. You think of it as battery usage, but of course you charge that battery, and that is electricity. If you're doing this on a plugged-in laptop, it's more obvious that you're using electricity. But in all of these things, not only you're driving events, you're driving the use of software in a data center. The use of that software, of course, requires electricity to output your data. So this is just the visual representation. Heard a very funny question from one of my colleagues to a group of legislators recently. It was right after 4th of July, and he said, all right, how many people in here had a great 4th of July? All the hands go up. How many people videotape those fireworks? Tons of hands go up because everyone's excited. And he said, all right, who has ever watched previous fireworks videos from former 4th of July's? Almost no hands go up. But how many people shared it with their family, friends? All these hands go. He's like, okay, every time you sent that fireworks video, you have now made another copy of it. And every time you made a copy of it, it requires more data, which drives more electricity usage. The whole point being, it is us, it is we, the citizens, we, the consumers, who are driving the electricity, the need for more electricity, the need for more data. All right, here's what I tried to describe to you in words. This is the inside of a data center. It just exactly as exciting as you might imagine. A lot of racks of computers. Mostly, if you do a data center tour, what you'll hear about, frankly, is a lot about the how they keep the place cool. Not as much about the computers, because it really is just a bunch of computers, a bunch of servers and racks, and different companies or different um, processes will be happening in different racks, and you'll see people walking around being IT people who service these computers, these racks, in any number of ways. Here's the outside visual of, I'm forgetting which data center this is. This is one that's been built in 3 phases. Each of these buildings is approximately the size of an aircraft carrier, and filled with the picture you saw formerly. So um, each of these, as I talk about a data center and give you statistics, look at one of these, like this one in the middle, and then you can multiply those statistics by, depending how many phases are going on. This one is in its 3rd phase. Most of my members build out 4, maybe 5 phases, which is why you will often hear these citations for the amount of acreage needed. It's not just for that first building, it's also to anticipate building in the future. And so you see here, this site's certainly several hundred acres. All right. So relevant to Kentucky, relevant to today's conversation. Um, how can we think of Kentucky becoming the next data center hotspot, or will it be? I'm a Midwesterner. I'm actually from Southern Illinois, and spent any number of driving hours as a teen headed to, say, Murray, Kentucky. So I have some understanding of at least the western side of the state. But a lot of pride in the Midwest. And I actually am a true believer, and I think the Midwest is perfectly suited to be a place where the next wave of technological innovation happens. So I think California is, while very important, kind of yesterday's technology. I think the Midwest could be tomorrow's. So, and why is that? And what do we think about as an industry, and how can Kentucky be one of these states that benefits? Where do I represent essentially hyperscale data centers. That is a billion-dollar investment, not co-locations that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. And if not, we can get into that later. But where do these folks go? So the most obvious, probably for virtually any industry, is a state that is wants new investment, tech jobs, and an increase in property taxes. I lived in a small town, and we had to pay out of our pockets as the town grew to build new schools, new sewer, etc. And we just all but begged back then for some kind of light industry to show up. It was always a challenge. This would have been an answer to prayer, honestly. Next, the tax environment, or I'll call it the business environment to be a little more broad, but certainly the taxes. It's just worth noting that no hyperscale data centers have located in a state that imposes a sales tax on servers and equipment. So if you think back to that picture of being inside the building, those servers, server blades, we refer to them as, get swapped out about every 4 years. That may or may not change with advancing technology, but it's not likely to change by much. And if anything, it's only likely to increase in speed. Why is that? To be competitive, to deliver to you what you need in the amount of time that you're willing to wait for it, and with all the right reliability. So, in a $1 billion data center, approximately half of that cost are computers. So, you can imagine swapping out $500 million in computers every 4 years tends to be a little bit pricey. And so, if there is a traditional sales tax on those blades, it racks up, no pun intended, cost pretty quickly. Instead, we see ourselves and believe it is appropriate to treat us like most states treat equipment, of sometimes it's agriculture, manufacturing, et cetera, and not apply sales tax when we're using it internally as opposed to selling it outside of our companies. Oops. Next, we need available land. Let's go back here. Available land, as I mentioned, I showed you the picture. And then we love strong community partners. Again, a little bit like bullet number one, but folks who actually want us there. What does Kentucky gain when a data center shows up? Well, obviously, just like with any kind of investment in, certainly in infrastructure investment in your state, there's new activity, economic activity that is spurred by that. Um, my mega scale friends, when they build out data centers, they build out their electricity connections and substations. That is not necessarily true of everybody who says they're building a data center. They can speak for themselves, but for my folks, this is typical of what they do, for a lot of reasons, but not least of which, they're very concerned about being good partners in a location. They also bring jobs. There's a lot of numbers you'll see out there about jobs, and we can talk about this more if you have questions, and I'm happy to get way more granular here. But think about the folks who are walking around inside that area I showed you, who are working on the computers. About 100 new positions. These positions pay six figures, and these are for high school students, or people with high school diplomas, or if you've had some trade school. Some of my members they have like 8, 12, 16-week training programs that they will put people into to train them for these jobs. As you can imagine, I grew up in a very rural area. As you can imagine, a rural area, a six-figure job means that you get to be home every night. You have a different standard of living than maybe most of the folks who live around you, and you get to stay in your hometown, which is, to me, amazing. Finally, as one quick example, and I will push all the bias here just to the middle, Loudoun County, which has more data centers than anywhere else in the world. But to give you a number, they started developing data centers a decade ago. Their property tax revenue just this last, so in 2024, was right at $900 million, which of course brings all the benefits that you all know better than me, and that is keeping other taxes down, et cetera. Another way to think about this 900 million is it pays for most of their K-12 in Loudoun County, all just from the property tax, just on data centers. A quick 2 slides on economic activity. This is just, as we call it, the here and not here analysis. So if data centers are in your state, in your county, in your locality, here's what you get. You see the pluses. If they're not there, these things just simply don't happen. So it's a pretty simple analysis. Why is it so simple? Because data centers in a lot of ways can be located anywhere. Data centers don't need to be in Kentucky to serve Kentuckians. They could be literally anywhere. And so there are reasons to want to attract data centers because they could move sort of anywhere. But again, I'll point out the Midwest has a lot to offer along the lines of things that details mentioned earlier that mega scale builders are looking for. And then the incremental tax revenue from data centers, just to point out the various sorts of tax that are still collected if and when data centers locate in your state or counties. And then just a couple quick things to mention, and this one is right on point too, as you teed it up, Madam Chair. What happens with electricity and the cost, et cetera? So what do Kentuckians not get? There's a ton of misinformation floating around. And again, I will point out, not least of which, because folks think of data centers all as one in one block industry, and there are different parts of the data center industry. Again, I'm talking about mega scale folks. And in this case, what is not happening is that electricity bills for current electricity customers, it is not increasing. Why is that? I won't bother you with just reading these bullet points, but let me highlight that my members are very interested in being good corporate citizens and good partners, good neighbors as they locate their data centers and as they operate their data centers. And this middle bullet point might be a little bit non-intuitive to folks, but as large companies come in and guarantee the purchase of long-term electricity usage, that actually works to drive down rates. I don't pretend to be an expert like the CEOs who run these companies are. So I've included some quotes from them to bring their testimony, as it were, into mine. But essentially, if you think about a business, if you have a long-term contracted, stable partner, it allows you greater flexibility in other areas of how you operate your business. That's the economic fundamentals of why this works. This should be Entergy, not energy here down with Kansas testimony. You see their quote. And then let me go to the next slide. So you can see in Virginia, where they've had more experience than anybody with data centers, you can see some extensive quotes here with lots of great stats from Bob Blue, who is the Dominion CEO. So a utility who is pointing out how they, number one, keep rates steady, if not drive down. And then number two, how much they appreciate having these large companies there. And then finally, just because why not? Last week in Pennsylvania, the legislative hearing, Pennsylvania got in on the act and pointed out that these large data centers, large load, so mega scale, um, absorb a bunch of the fixed costs. If you know anything on the business side, you understand this intuitively. Your larger customers always absorb a larger amount of fixed costs. Then finally, some fascinating new information or new-ish information. I'm always impressed by the innovation that my members bring, but a query, this was released by Google just a couple weeks ago. One query, one AI query uses the same electricity as about 9 seconds of watching television. 9 seconds. So think of Sunday football. You watch a couple football games, how much electricity has been used. That's a whole lot of searches that would have been covered in that same time. So while yes, it uses electricity, we're not talking some hours and hours comparison to other things we're doing in real life. Similarly, with water, data centers have one of two ways to go about cooling their systems, evaporative cooling or closed loop. About, if they're using evaporative, 80% of the water is still there and can be returned to whatever municipal system provided the water. And then about 20% of the water evaporates. What's that mean? Think about any kind of open, like if you have a swimming pool or if you watch a swimming pool, you have to refill it every now and then. When you make coffee in the morning, you've got the steam that comes up your cup. Not every ounce of water goes into that cup for your coffee. Um, and so that's what we mean by evaporative. Again, interesting comparison. I tried to pick a data center close to y'all. that I had stats for, but you see Montgomery County, Tennessee, you see the total gallons of water consumed in 2023, and you see that that was for the whole year was as much as, let's call it, two golf courses. Again, comparison for what other industries are using and how they're using the water. And then the additional I put in here again, Virginia, that has tons of experience here. This JLARC review that most data centers use about the same amount of water as an average office building. So they're as big as an office building, so maybe not too surprising that that's what they use. Final slide for me here is the national um, impact and direction of why AI and then hence data centers to power AI is important. And there are a couple different quotes here that I'm sure y'all are familiar with, but from the president, President Trump and his administration have very much made beating China in this space a national priority. And you just walk the cat backwards, as I say. AI goes back to data centers, goes back to energy. So we have a little bit of a national command to help meet these needs, and mega scale data centers hopefully are very much part of the solution that the president foresees in beating China. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions y'all have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very interesting. We do have several who've signed up for questions. We'll start with Co-Chair Bray.
Thank you for your presentation. How familiar are you all with Kentucky's energy policies?
So depending on who you mean by y'all, I hear your question. I'm not going to be the expert on Kentucky energy policy, but I'm happy to address anything where that energy policy abuts data centers.
Which is that's great. So obviously, you know, we've got a finite amount of generative capacity in Kentucky. We've had presentations that it seems like the demand has vastly outstripped our ability to supply power to them. Have other states put in programs to increase their generative capacity? What can we do, from your all's opinion, or what have you seen done to make sure that we've got enough power to fuel the demand on the data centers, but also make sure we've got enough energy for other economic development opportunities, whether it's manufacturing or tech services or whatever?
Thank you very much for that question. And I actually love that your question is coming from a place of, I'll call it optimism. And how do we do this? Not a, we want to shut it down. That's awesome. So what I've observed, and I have listened intently to tons of testimony around the country at this point. And again, not being an electricity expert, that there are several pieces here. And I'll a little bit walk backwards. So I think everybody in the chain has a little bit of responsibility here. For example, my folks are always looking, as you can imagine, electricity is a huge part of the input, right, for cost. And so we're always looking for ways to become more efficient. I think that is part of the solution. And I do think that is something to think about going forward. Dynamic versus static analysis. It's hard to do dynamic analysis, right? Because we don't know all the factors. But generally, as we look across history, electricity usage in any particular thing has decreased, even though our overall demand has increased. So you kind of end up back in the same place, but maybe not as fixated on AI longer term as we might be on whatever is next. Also, usage for data centers. We're in the stack of big users of electricity, but we're merely in the stack. I think the last thing I saw was like we're number 12, and that's largely behind lots of manufacturing, which begs your question. So, how do we make sure that Kentucky has enough electricity for now and for the future and for these other industries? It seems to me that there is a whole lot that can be done, should be done, on how quickly new productivity or production of electricity can come online. And it seems to be a large problem. And I realize that that is a national as well as in some cases state issue. But I think there should be no speed wasted in trying to address those issues, including transmission, so that a data center could be anywhere and still get electricity from anywhere in the state. If there's land available in central Kentucky, and your greatest generation of electricity is in eastern Kentucky, it's a shame that transmission might not be reliable enough to make it to that data center so that both companies can prosper. Last thing I'll say is the reality is, and you didn't exactly ask, and it sounds like you would you get this, but I just want to underscore it. Even data centers are just like every other industry, right? So they're not going to end up locating someplace where there is not enough electricity, and generally for years out. When they're building these billion-dollar buildings, they don't intend to abandon them in 5 years, right? So they intend to be there for the long haul. And so they need to make sure that there's electricity for the long haul. So your question gets right at being a viable location for data centers. Last thing as I think about it, I'll mention, some people have talked about loosening up their policies to allow companies to, I call it bring your own electricity. It's called behind the meter. And so it's not really what my industry does, but maybe it incentivizes more innovation if you allow folks to bring some of their own electricity to the dance, so to speak, and to run their data center off of that. But I think there's probably dozens and dozens of things to do, and I would love to follow up with you, maybe with some of these CEOs who we work with in the utility space, who would actually be able to address that question much more pointedly.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. I do think that we have an opportunity, if we can get the policy right, to, if you can guarantee so much base load usage, obviously that eats into the overhead of operating a new facility to generate power. And it is kind of counterintuitive because, the higher the demand, you would think the higher the price, but it does seem like there's an opportunity to stabilize rates because of, some of these other higher usage. But anyway, thank you for your testimony, and I would love to hear from some of your executives on the policy side of that.
And just so I can follow up with you, I'm sorry, I can't. You're really small on my screen. Can you tell me who that was that asked the question again? And I'll make sure to get in touch with you.
He's really small.
Yeah, not the tallest guy in the world, anyway.
Well, I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. No worries. But yeah, Representative Josh Bray, if you just want to, our staff will get in touch with you and exchange contact information on that. So
great. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. We have several additional senators. Senator Williams.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I want to. Water is not a problem for Kentucky. We got more miles of navigable water than any other state but Alaska. So water's great. But power, I think the enthusiasm here is that we want to scale up for the power, and we just need to know how to do it. And we have power here now in our coal resources. We have power down in the future with nuclear. We got uranium stores, reprocessing. We've heard energy. So in terms of orders of magnitude is really my question. We've got the current set of hyperscaling data centers use a certain amount. Give us an order of magnitude on that. We got the next generation, and I'm thinking about some of these chipsets. Like if we start building a data center now, I'm presuming they're probably looking at, the Feynman chipsets from NVIDIA. What's the power density of that one that we're going to build 2 years? Actually, Feynman is my favorite scientist. He wrote a book called Chaos Theory that everybody ought to read. It's wonderful. We also spent a bundle of money, him flying first class, New York to California, looking at clouds, by which he solved the problem of turbulence, okay? Because there's turbulence. Anyway, that's my aside. And a lot of this water, if it's going up there, it's going to become a cloud, right? It doesn't go away. We don't destroy water. But anyway, give me the questions about the order of magnitude that we can expect if we're going to start building data centers and building power generation to match those in the future.
All right, I'm going to do my best to answer that, but then if I'm off track, just please redirect me.
Okay.
So without a doubt, technology will continue to advance. And with that, two things. I mentioned one, so I won't re-explain that piece. But on the one side, we can expect greater efficiencies. So we can anticipate that for this is Moore's law. By the way, I love that you have a favorite scientist. That's really cool. But if we're familiar with Moore's law, and that is that computing power doubles, or the cost of the same computer power gets cut in half every 18 months. That's roughly still true, give or take a little bit of the timing there, and give or take a little bit of the monies there. If that is still true, then we can anticipate that about every 18 months we will see a doubling of power. That has Some argue that we're getting up against the limits of that, and yet we are on the precipice, and an area that I love, that's a whole different conversation. We're on the precipice, I believe, of mass quantum computing. And if we went to quantum computing, we would have this would all be on steroids. We'd use a lot more electricity, but we'd have a lot more data to help us solve some of these electricity challenges. As for the output in so there's a prediction both on the of the need for more compute. Let me get back to the technology we're talking about today, which is AI. But I've not seen anything that has countered this, although it's a little hard at the moment to put a precise finger on it. While a lot of this AI usage is new to us and new maybe in the communications technology space, the use of AI, as the committee well knows, going back to neural networks and originally called neural networks in the 50s, and then machine learning more recently, and now AI, it's been going on for literally decades. And so we can anticipate the trend line will continue, but now with the public awareness, there'll be an uptick, and that uptick will come not necessarily in communications use, although that certainly is true. The uptick will come in the fascinating uses. We heard one of the retailers earlier. I believe you've had healthcare experts in already who have awesome stories of AI use. And I now think that you can't actually, in one of your previous hearings, someone said, can you tell me, like somebody, it may have been you, every bit of software now has AI labeled on it, and I agree. And if you walk through a trade show of any sort, everyone's got an AI like sticker up somewhere in their booth. I think everyone's looking for how do they gain greater efficiencies by baking AI into the cake. All of that they won't be searches, but all of that AI use will drive the need for more electricity as well. So on both sides, I think I see no reason to doubt that the intensity of the data that we will need will continue to increase. I see no reason to doubt that because of that, the electricity we will need will continue to increase. The good news is if they start siting a data center today, for example, it takes about 5 years till it comes online. In those 5 years, technology will advance that I have no reason to doubt will meet the needs of what is needed without really anticipating more electricity usage per unit versus per use generally. And most companies are kind of used to that, right? So it's the same as if you suddenly have a new town pop up or expand. I moved into a town in Texas, 4,200 people. By the time I left, 8 years later, it was 42,000 people. Obviously, utilities had to plan for that, for all that HVAC. And so I hope that answers your question, that the trend lines to me are pretty clear, and that we do need to be thinking about what we're going to be using tomorrow. But I don't think we're talking magnitudes different, as long as we stay pretty true to the current trend lines.
Okay. If I can follow up, Madam Chair. Yeah. So in my district, there's a 2.4 gigawatt power plant up there, down here in Gent. We have one user that uses about 430 megawatts. Okay, right next to him, there's another user that uses a good bit of that too. A lot of that power is consumed locally. So what I was looking for is, I've heard that the current generation of data centers are like 200 to 400 megawatts. Maybe the ones we're starting to build are 400 to 500 megawatts, which again, doesn't scare us. We got all sorts of industries that do that scale, as you indicated. It's not necessarily the largest, but the ones down the road, I've heard maybe a gigawatt is what some of them may be. Is that right? Do we need to be planning for gigawatt, multi-gigawatt power generation down the road?
I think the answer is yes, and not to be too glib. One of the biggest challenges, and you guys know this again way more than me because you run into it in a lot more spaces than I do. We tend to have a challenge of being very good at planning for what we see in front of us and not so good at guessing what we need for tomorrow. And so a lot of legislation, a lot of regulation considers either what's right in front of us or a static analysis. I think the best legislation, the best planning does skate to where the puck is going as opposed to where the puck is, to follow that analogy. And yes, there is every reason to believe that these data centers will become stronger and stronger, so to speak, meteor and meteor over time, because there's no reason to doubt otherwise, given the continued advance. I mean, we can talk about NVIDIA, but there are all kinds of, there will be, in fact, there already are people who are developing chips to compete directly with NVIDIA, not least which is in China, but there are some here domestically. And there's no reason to believe that the scale of what they can do, even within the same physical area, will increase over time. So, long answer to your question, but shortly answered, yes, we need to be planning because that is what we already see coming.
Thank you. Senator Thomas?
Thank
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Cleveland, I enjoy your analysis and I appreciate the points you made today. I do have this particular question for you, though. Okay. You talked about Loudoun County, and I've got a lot of family in D.C. I've said this before. And so I've been up in Loudoun County, and that is just a beautiful county, very prosperous, very cutting edge, just a very beautiful county. But my feeling is that the reason Loudoun County has so many data centers and is such a big revenue producer is because of its proximity to Washington, D.C. and the federal government, which obviously is going to consume a lot of data because it is the federal government. You also talked about Montgomery County, Tennessee, and of course, being somewhat familiar with Tennessee, Montgomery County, Tennessee, for those who don't know, is located in Clarksville, Tennessee, which is the home of Fort Campbell, which is a major military base here in the United States. So it does seem to me that data centers are locating in places where there's a huge need for information already. And if Kentucky were looking, and I agree with the sentiments of Representative Bray, that's a big issue that we've got to address at the end of this year, is where should we focus data centers on? It would seem to me that data centers in Kentucky are best used in what we call the Golden Triangle, the Cincinnati, Lexington, Louisville area. That's where they're best utilized. Interestingly enough, as I was listening to Senator Williams' comments, I said that's the district that Senator Williams represents. He represents the Golden Triangle here in Kentucky. So tell me if I'm right or wrong that as we move forward in 2026 and beyond, our first steps here in Kentucky should be to build data centers in that area, the Golden Triangle area of Kentucky, or maybe to complement Montgomery County, there in Christian County or in Trigg County, which are counties that encompass or are contiguous to Fort Campbell. And Trigg County is very interesting because it has a lot of water there that we can use for energy. Your comments, please.
Sure. Well, do I have to pick whether you're right or wrong? Can I give you partial credit?
You can say I'm wrong. I've been wrong before.
No, you're not. You're not wrong, sir. Sir, your analysis is right on. As far as who uses a lot of data, I mean that's absolutely right. Here's the missing piece that I personally find fascinating. I mentioned it briefly earlier. We can talk about it more. But right now, and for the foreseeable future, latency is not an issue. So where the data centers locate is largely irrelevant from the use of the data. So, for example, could your counties be served from a data center in Wisconsin? Sure. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. And it would have no impact whatsoever on that data used. We can imagine a future where that might change. But right now, and for the foreseeable future, that won't. So the actual situs of the data center, near or far from a military compound, for example, or a hub of other activity, not that interesting for when they're figuring out location, when my members are figuring out locations. One note on Loudoun County, the actual reason that without a doubt, there's a lot of government use of those data centers. No doubt, you're exactly right. One of the more strategic reasons for why those data centers were located there was the location of May East. We're getting deep into internet stuff here now, but it was the biggest, forever, maybe still, the biggest hub for internet traffic in the world. There's May East, there's May West out in California. And so when they were building those data centers, you had a lot of the right technological knowledge in the area to build the structures as well as then operate the data center. So that's actually why it grew. In fact, one of our people who works with us very closely, her name is Barbara Comstock, former state rep and then former congresswoman from Virginia. She's actually known as the godmother of data centers, which I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not, but she is. And again, happy to give you tons of information on why they started in that area. But she was kind of the architect of why all that began.
Thank you for that. Senator Rawlings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, long term, how is a community benefited long term? You addressed the job creation, but I've been told that once a data center is up and running, very few people work there. So, how would the community benefit? And is it true that it would be just a very few people and operators can work remotely?
Right. So yeah, I've heard this operator remotely thing a couple times. And that's a mixed answer on that. And let me do that one first, just because it's kind of the easiest. It again, depending on what kind of office space you may have been in the future, or I'm sorry, in the past, or how things are run in the Capitol there, there were times that the IT guy, so to speak, could log into your computer, could log into the server and make some changes. But you probably also noticed that the server needed to be tended to in the physical space often. And that is no different. Again, now we're just multiplying it by hundreds and hundreds of servers located in one big building. So it's no different when it comes to a data center. Not necessarily that every issue that comes up has to be tended to on site. But there are plenty of things that do have to be tended to on site. Hence, you end up with the number, and it varies a little bit, but not too much. And if anything, it varies a little bit on the high side. I was trying to be conservative and put in 100 new jobs that are, think about them as the actual data center employees, right? So if Google owns the data center, they might be Google employees. Those are the ones that to which I referred, six-figure salaries with the education that I talked about. There are all kinds of other jobs that come with that. And I am not going to remember. I'll give you the general idea. I've actually got stats on this from a couple different states where we've done analysis. I'm not going to remember those exactly, but you end up with a couple hundred other jobs related to security, outside physical maintenance, vendors of various sorts, et cetera, that are immediately attached to that facility. So this is not like the secondary economic impact. This is primary. And then for secondary, of course, you get all those secondary demands. Here's what, well, two different ways to take this. I'm going to use Louisiana first. Louisiana was very excited to get a data center announcement in the northeast part of the state. Why was that? Because they had a lot of land. They didn't have a lot of people, and they didn't have a lot of economic opportunities. So the governor was very excited to get a data center because, to his point, if they had attracted an automobile manufacturing center, he wouldn't have had the people in that part of the state to take those jobs. And it's not a particularly economic prosperous part of the state, so it wasn't an area that normally could attract a lot of folks anyway. Mostly people were moving out of that. They would be born, raised in a town, and move out of that part of the state. So he sees this as a way to drive the economy in that part of the state with the right size industry for the right sized area. So rural, with electricity, with water, but not with a lot of people. Another example is in the southwestern corner of Indiana. The Speaker Huston, there is he's a better salesperson on this stuff than I am. He will tell you a story about getting data centers located in that area and watching the economy boom from like secondary economic growth. So the data center goes there, that then starts training folks who understand IT. So other companies move in because there's an educated workforce at some level, or they want to be close to a data center for their own purposes, for whatever their businesses are. And that area has grown. I believe he told me it was the biggest growth area in the state of Indiana. So a couple different ways to look at it. I don't know that a data center makes a lot of sense in some places, right? High land cost, crowded areas. I don't know if that makes sense, but I do know in some areas, Kentucky could see a real opportunity. And think of those two slides I showed you, the here and not here. Um, this is just me personally. I, I think it would have been pretty cool to have had some kind of opportunity like this when I was growing up in a rural community, and an opportunity to stay living at home, perhaps. I never really had an opportunity to think that way unless I wanted to be a farmer. And so the 100 jobs is better than the 0 jobs, right? And so that's the way I tend to think of these opportunities.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a few other people who've signed up for questions. So if you could just be brief in your questions and brief in your answers, I would appreciate it, as we have a good agenda still to go. So Representative Lehman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. I know, look, I understand the current need for additional data centers. I mean, I'm trying to put this in I mean, at some point, we're going to get a lot more efficient about data. I mean, most of these data centers, most of what they store is garbage. I think, as you mentioned with the firework, 1,000 firework videos and stuff like that. I mean, at some point as we get more efficient, AI helps us to make better use of data centers. Is there a time that we have to plan for, like end of life of these big facilities? And what does that look like? And do your members think about this? I mean, we're talking about, and again, 10, 20, 30 years, very large buildings with lots of electronic components. Does this become brownfields, or is there some plan for how to redevelop this or appropriately handle when these things close? So appreciate some thoughts on that.
Sure. So let me separate out two things. I think what you're asking about is the physical plant versus, say, the server blades. Server blades, I mentioned earlier, every 4 years or so, those get replaced. So assuming an infrastructure of computing that looks a lot like what we've always had, you would assume in the future that you could update those buildings very quickly, about every 4 years, with replacing the server blades. The rest would be typical of any large, I mean, in some ways, these buildings are not that interesting. In some ways, they're fascinating, but they're large metal buildings. And so you'd have the same kind of end of life issue of a large metal building with a concrete slab, often with conduits built under the concrete so that they can run data and electricity lines. But that's it. So there's nothing particularly special about that as compared to farm buildings, for example.
Thank you. Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brief comment, then a question. In contrast to Senator Thomas, I think it's important when we're looking at policy that we're looking at what's needed. So we talked about power generation, we talked about power capacity, we talked about water use. Obviously, Kentucky has plenty of water. If you go to my neck of the woods in East Kentucky, we've built out massive grids where the coal mines used to operate, and I think we have the capacity. The issue that we run into, though, is the generation side. So we're looking at baseload generation, so whether that's nuclear, whether that's coal, maybe over in Owensboro, I don't know. But I think it's mindful that we look at what we have, and in the case where I'm at, I've got a power company that's looking at 15 PSE on. So if, like in your presentation, you mentioned, if we could absorb those fixed costs and make it easier on our residents, I think that's a win. Going into the comment, Co-Chair Bray took my question, but in the explanation on that, you mentioned power generation behind the meter, so to speak. So number one, what does that look like? And number two, what does the regulations behind that look like?
So really good question on both. I think those are both to be determined. At best I understand. Again, not an electricity expert, especially when it comes to the federal regulations. But what would it look like from where my members would be concerned? It'd be the opportunity, if they wanted to take it, and I think that's an open question, of providing their own electricity generation at the site. There's a lot of talk, you guys have probably heard this, about modular nuclear reactors. Those are not for today. They could very well be 5 years. I think I've seen some predictions for 5 to 10 years. And that could very well be. But if and when that happens, you could imagine them pulling up a tractor trailer size reactor and parking it next to the facility and running their facility off a couple of those. I can't remember what the capacities for some of these are. But that's kind of what it would, honestly, what it would look like, I think, in the longer term. Shorter term, I can tell you that Kansas is exploring whether they would allow, not Kansas, I'm sorry, Nebraska is exploring whether they would allow some behind the meter, particularly if there were alternative fuels like ethanol used, and what that would look like. So, but I've not been far down this conversation yet because it's not been a primary conversation. To be honest with you, about 6 months ago, we were arguing about whether data centers should exist at all. And so it's been a whole new world of happiness to see people trying to figure out how do we get more and how do we generate more electricity? Because I think, listen, data centers or not, we need more electricity. Data centers just happen to be the focus, but we're going to use more. So I think these are the right questions. I'm just not sure I have a ton of data for you yet because we're just not that far down that road.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Williams, did you have a last comment?
Yeah, I really not. Just a little bit of clarification on my district. Louisville election, Northern Kentucky is where the Golden Triangle activity. Gallatin, Carroll, Owen, and even Franklin, 100 six-figure jobs would be a major economic positive impact for those areas. And they would want me to say they would like to see those 100 six-figure jobs. So that's the bulk of my district.
I think you could take every one of us up here and say we'd be for those jobs. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, discussion. I really appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you need any follow-up, obviously have your staff reach out. More than happy to help you, but it's been my honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Will do. All right, next on our agenda, I'm very excited to have members from the University of Kentucky come talk about some of the exciting work they're doing, not just at the university, but through healthcare. And so welcome both of you to the table. Glad to have you both with us today. If you want to introduce yourselves, and then you can start your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Technology. My name is Thomas A. I'm an AI research fellow at the National Board of Medical Education. This is Hubie Ballard. He's my partner in all of this. We know that your time is super valuable and we're running short, so I'm going to be a little bit quicker as we walk through some of the things, but we are so grateful. Thank you all so much for your invitation and letting us talk to you about the things that we're doing at UK. It has never been more exciting and dynamic, and we are all leaning into AI just like you all are, as we're trying to figure out how do we integrate this into the way that we teach, the way that we learn, the way that we train the workforce of Kentucky. So I am teaching a course in October, so 1 month from now, about the fundamentals of artificial intelligence. And the idea is that we expect that every single one of our students who walks through the door is going to be touching AI in some way, right? Whether that is science and medicine and technology, every single one of them are going to need to understand the fundamentals of how to use it. This is a logo that I created for that course. I created it on my own. It took me about an hour and a half. And you think about this kind of technology and power behind every single student, behind every single project that they work on, all the companies that they're going to build. We expect that it is our responsibility to train those students to make sure that they understand the fundamental concepts. And we're starting that with Tech 100. So this is that course. We call it Collaborative Intelligence. It's understanding and using modern AI. And the idea is that we want to inspire students to be active users of artificial intelligence, not just designing models and things like that, but using it for their life, their workforce, the way that they learn. And so it's a 10-module course that builds on hands-on activities that starts with just basic prompt engineering through agent design, and then finally by the end of it, they're doing things that with AI that they couldn't otherwise do without it. The final proposal is a proposal where they want to use AI to solve some problem in a community that they care about, whether that is their hometown, whether that's Kentucky as a whole, whether that's their dodgeball team. The expectation is that they use their no-code techniques to figure out how can they make their community better. This is Katie Thompson. She is my co-lead in this course, and she's also the founder and the principal investigator of the AI Machine Learning Hub. This is the connective tissue at UK that brings people together. We are pediatricians, we're physicians, and she is a statistician, and the projects that we're working on need people from all over campus in order to lean into this technology, because we know what we know, she knows what she knows, and boy, bringing these people together is really where the power of the university network comes from. In her hub, she has 350 people from across campus from 11 different colleges. She can rattle off the numbers better than I can, but the short story is that we are having symposiums and having conversations just like this as we try to figure out what are the problems that we can solve with the technology that already exists. On the right side of the screen there is a picture of some grass. This was a student project where they're using a machine learning computer vision model where they take pictures of grass to identify grass that is toxic to pregnant horses. And that is super cool, and it's just one of the many things that they are working on. Thinking about not just students, but our faculty. This is Trey Knatzer. He's our assistant provost for teaching and learning and runs our CELT, which is the Enhancement in Learning and Teaching. The short story is that it fell to him to figure out how to use artificial intelligence in our teaching. And when everyone else across the country at universities were saying that AI is going to make students cheat and we don't know how to grade them anymore because they're writing essays using ChatGPT, he was figuring out the fundamentals of how to integrate AI into the way that we teach and assess our students. And so he is running workshops and events on AI skills and ethics and tools and applications. And he is not just a resource for us at the university. He's become a resource at the state and at the national level. Talking about kind of the national level, I wanted to talk quickly about our Center for Computational Sciences. And so this is Jim Griffin. He's in charge of our CCS, and Vikram Gazula. To make a long story short, they're doing a whole lot of things, including workshops and trainings, but specifically they are providing national scale AI support and tools for the National Science Foundation. So the NSF has an Access supercomputing program that just launched, and every single question from researchers around the country, whether you're at MIT or Stanford, every single one of those questions gets routed through Lexington and answered by our team here and then routed back, because we're using language models, and it's powering the underlying research that is going into artificial intelligence around the country. They also have two other projects that I'm not super familiar with because to be honest with you, it's a little bit above my head, but one of them is with the National Artificial Intelligence Research Resource Pilot Program. That was one of the White House's new AI action plan agendas. They are one of, I think, 6 or 8 partner, we are one of 6 or 8 partner institutions that are providing services for that one. And then there's another one that I truly don't understand because it's above my head. But thinking about going from kind of the above my head to the ground level, how can we improve the lives of Kentuckians? I wanted to tell you about Jay Miller. So he is the dean of the College of Social Work, and he is already well known for using technology in social work and pushing the limits of how we're using virtual reality and artificial intelligence. That's an article in Fortune magazine from 2023. But he has built tools that not just connect patients with resources, but also foster care children. There's a whole bunch of tools that if I had maybe a couple more hours I could tell you about all the things that he's doing, but he is not just using AI to make his work and his social workers more effective, but also on the back end, he's doing a whole bunch of the administrative things that you keep hearing about where people are saying that it's going to streamline something. He's doing budget reconciliations. He's doing all sorts of things that that are the promise of AI, but he's leaning into them and investing the time and the effort into making sure that every single one of the social worker students that pass through his college are equipped with the ability to use these things to make themselves more effective and efficient so that those social workers can have more impact on the ground talking to families instead of spending time in their offices filling out paperwork. And then, so going from the College of Social Work to now to design. This is Joe Brewer. He's the Director of Technology at the UK College of Design. This is the college that houses architecture and interior design, some landscape architecture and things like that. He is doing some incredible stuff on both the education and just where they work. That is the Gray Design building that was just very briefly shown. It has thousands of sensors for their HVAC system. He's got something like 80 geothermal wells in the parking lot, and all of these things are connected by AI in order to make us more efficient and effective. So over the 2 months, over the summertime, when nobody was going through the classes because they were on summer break, some of those classrooms got up to 110 degrees because they weren't detecting people, and so they weren't chilling the offices. And that's the kind of efficiency that we can gain using a little bit more data. Similarly, those fabrication labs that he showed at the very beginning, some of those plants, use artificial intelligence to model the structures that students are making. You know, when you make, whether it is an architectural design for a building or you're designing a shoe, when you're designing them in your basement, in your classroom, there are a lot of little subtleties that you don't realize in 3D until you actually produce it with a fabrication plant. And so they're using AI to model those things. So they're not printing the first draft, they're printing the fourth or the fifth draft. And that way we're saving time, we're becoming more efficient, and that way we're making actually better products. This is a slide from Cody Baumgartner. He is our director for Center for Applied AI. He is a friend of this committee. He wanted us to highlight the change over time over the past year of work that they've been doing. This very impressive pie chart on the right side gives me a glimpse into the number of people and the number of organizations and committees that his group is touching. He's going all across the campus because it represents, every single one of those slices represents somebody who is interested in using artificial intelligence to expand whatever work they're doing, whether that's in medicine, whether that's in libraries, or whether that is in whatever their study of discipline is. This is just one of those examples. This is AgriGuide. So this was a partnership between the Center for Applied AI and the College of Agriculture, Food, and Environment. The short story is that they have trained and fine-tuned a language model just based on Kentucky data, Kentucky research about Kentucky farmlands, and they have essentially given it away. There's a website that you can go and you can ask it questions. My sister had a fungus growing in one of her plants, and we thought we needed to get rid of it. We asked AgriGuide, and it turns out this is a friendly fungus. But any person can go on there and talk about invasive species and fertilizers and strategies and soil testing and those kinds of things. It's really cool stuff, and I wish we had more time to tell you about it. But we think that this is where the rubber hits the road. So these are the students. So Hubie, a couple of years ago, started the Innovators in Medicine Club. This is a group of now 265 people from across campus who are all focused on solving problems in healthcare using technology and artificial intelligence. That top picture was from our meeting back at the end of August. So this was just a couple of weeks ago. The short story is that these are the students who are leaning into AI. They are hungry for it. And this pocket of students is just in healthcare and medicine, but we're building innovators in all disciplines, whether that's fine arts or communication, whatever it is where students want to get together and share ideas and technology and design solutions to problems that otherwise couldn't be solved. When you think about ChatGPT for us is like brand new technology, right? We barely understand it. But for these students, some of them, they've had it for 3 years now. They've had it the majority of their high school time. And so now they're walking onto campus and they're expecting to learn, what is the next step? How do I use this technology to make the next Amazon, to make the next Facebook? You know, Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos were their age when they started those companies. And now we think that with this technology, they can take it so much further, because you essentially have in your pocket somebody who can give you feedback and recommendations and nudges and, oh, did you know that they were already doing this way in Kansas or whatever? And so we think that the students is really going to be the lifeblood of this, because we also know that at the University of Kentucky, the majority of our students stay in Kentucky, right? And so we have the expectation that we feel the obligation to train up the workforce of Kentucky so that they can use artificial intelligence. And so this is why we're leaning in. This is one of their projects. So this was put together by Hunter Colson and Matthew Bernard. A lot of people have talked about how AI and personalized tutors is going to change the way that we learn, right? And what they found in real life, that a small subset of students in the medical school could use that technology well. If you had a background in engineering or computer science, this was awesome and it blew the doors off of how you learn. But for the rest of us, we weren't using it as much. And so they built this system. We call it the Socratic Tutor. It's a personalized precision education platform that keeps track of every single question that you ask, every single question that you miss on the questions that it generates, and it tracks your development over the course of the entire medical school career. Similarly, from an administrator's perspective, we're able to train our course material, our specific UK course material. That was a PowerPoint from one of ours. Our specific UK course material on there to map our curriculum so we understand where students are starting to lag behind. We can pick up when students are starting to fail earlier. And this technology is mind-blowing, and they're giving it away to all the students at the College of Medicine. It's not like they're looking to make a buck off of this, right? We are putting together a study with the faculty where we are looking to see whether or not deploying this for every student, does that change your board exam scores? You know, does that decrease the amount of time that you need to study because it makes you more efficient? This is Brent Harrison. He's at the Director of Undergraduate Studies in Computer Science. He is one of the people putting together the new bachelor's in artificial intelligence. So if all you want to do is learn about how I can use AI, and that is what your goal is coming into college, he's the guy for you. He also is offering a new certificate for people outside of CS. Let's say you're a communications major, but want to make an effort to integrate AI more and get recognition from the workforce that you have this extra training. That's what that certificate is for. He's also doing a lot more courses on things that I still am working on understanding, like machine learning and building those models, if anyone is interested. This is just a quick personal story. This is Gia Bay. She essentially is using artificial intelligence in looking at EEGs to understand where in the brain people who have epilepsy have disease. It's incredible stuff. I find it super fascinating. And the only reason I know about her work is because our kids are friends at daycare. And it kind of represents the vast number of people who are working on AI in all kinds of different ways. And we as a university are working to try to bring that all of these people under one umbrella, so that if I am designing a chatbot to teach students how to deliver bad news about a patient's child or something like that, then maybe the law school can take that exact same technology, change it a little bit for cross-examinations. We are working on a way to centralize all of those things, and we're hoping to have more about that soon. But all of this, everything that we've been talking about, is essentially working towards making lives better in Kentucky. That's the underlying goal for all of this. Hubie and I represent a growing group of physicians who believe that artificial intelligence can improve patient outcomes, can improve the physician shortage in Kentucky, can improve access to Eastern Kentucky, can make healthcare more efficient, more effective. We can be better. We can be better because now we have technology that didn't exist 10 years ago, and it's up to us to figure out how to deploy that across the state. One quick example is we think about sepsis. Sepsis is a killer all around the world, right? A lot of people die of sepsis. In Kentucky in 2023, there were 37,000 patients who were admitted to hospitals. because of sepsis. That's all hospitals, not just at UK. Of those 37,000, it attributed $2.4 billion worth of cost to insurance companies, and 81% of those 81% of those patients with sepsis were covered by Medicare or Medicaid. And so we understand the vast responsibility that we have to be a little bit more efficient, to be more effective. And when you think about sepsis, every single hour that goes by without diagnosing and treating somebody for sepsis, their risk of mortality increases by 9%. So this isn't just a number of dollars. This is real people's lives. And what if we had an AI system in the background looking at every single one of your vital signs, all of your inputs, your outputs, your allergies? Does it know that you had colon cancer? Did it know that you have chemotherapy? It looks at the demographics of all of the people who are similar to you to identify the people who are going to become septic a little bit earlier. Even if it was just 1 hour earlier, that would be a substantial difference. And what if we had a system like that? And the reality is we do. We have that AI system. And we initially took one of the off-the-shelf Epic models and deployed it at the hospital, and it didn't work. And we were pretty bummed about it because we thought we could get away easy. But it didn't work. And it didn't work because Kentucky is different. Kentucky is different from California and New York, and the patients are different from Brazil and London. And the model is built on 400 million patients all across the world. And what we needed was a model built on Kentucky patients with Kentucky data, with Kentucky problems. And so we built that. We didn't build that. The people at UK Healthcare built that. But they built and trained a model based on the healthcare data that they had. And it's not perfect. It's better, but it's not perfect, but it's getting better every single year because we're getting more data and we're understanding how the model works, and we're able to change the weights, and we're able to get more fine-tuned, better quality data. Now we have these microphones that listen to every single conversation, and we're using it right now to make documentation a little bit easier so that physicians can have more face-to-face time. But what if we took that exact same data and we used it to identify how do Kentucky people talk about Kentucky problems? The vernacular that we use is different from anywhere else. And can we figure out ways that we can link that the words that we use in Kentucky to the diseases that affect Kentucky? Those are the kinds of things that we think. When we think about the future of healthcare, we think about precision medicine. We don't think about taking the models that everyone else is using everywhere else. We think about using models that we build ourselves for us. Because I was born here, I grew up here, my son you saw him, right? These are the tools that are going to affect our lives just as much as everyone else across the state. And so there are three projects that the Cabinet for Health and Family Services has a state university partnership where every 3 years you can propose getting access to state data, super valuable data. And just a quick blurb for them, the Kentucky healthcare data is actually really good. And it's something that I don't think we recognize or talk about a lot. But when you talk to Massachusetts and New York about how long does it take for you to get and use data from a state perspective, it takes 18 to 24 months. Here, it takes like 6 months. You all did that. And so thank you so much. And now it's up to us to figure out how do we use that data to make healthcare better. And so we put together 3 proposals. The first one is to try to figure out how do we decrease the risk of readmission for patients with congestive heart failure. Heart failure is a serious disease that affects a lot of people in Kentucky. And it is a very expensive admission because patients will often be admitted for days, if not weeks at a time, as their heart improves. And so what we want to do is we want to get a hold of Medicaid claims data and combine it with our UK healthcare data to design a predictive model to identify patients who are at very high risk of coming back into the hospital and intervening on those patients and figuring out how do we be more tailored and more precise with our education? How do we, have like a step down clinic? Do we visit them at their homes in order to make sure that they don't bounce back to the hospital? That's just one of the projects. This is part of the Advancing Kentucky Together network, which is a strategic initiative that essentially looks at how can the university work on these 4 pillars to make life in Kentucky a little bit better. And the places that we're focusing on for this are healthcare, education, the workforce, and just the community at large. And we're convinced that AI is going to play into every single one of those pillars. The second project is for hepatitis C, medication compliance. We cured hepatitis C. We didn't. But people have cured hepatitis C. It is 98% curable if you take your medicines the right way. And there are populations in Kentucky who have hepatitis C that we have data on that our cure rate is about 60% because people just don't take their medicine. And so can we use AI to get people to take their medicine better? And this is the details for it, but the short story is that this technology exists. There are smart pill bottles that every time you pop the top, it sends out a cellular signal. We're working on building an AI system that every night at 9 p.m., it scrolls through the list of patients who haven't popped the top on their bottle, and then another AI system that just gives them a nudge, whether that is a text message, a phone call, that just says, hey, I know you're busy. Don't forget to take your meds tonight. That's it. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't work, great, we'll try something else. But if it does, then that decreases cirrhosis in Kentucky, liver cancer in Kentucky, a communicable disease, right? And it's the software itself is simple. It's basic. We could probably write it in a couple of weeks. We're already working on it, and we have a pretty good working prototype. If only we had a little bit more access to data, which thank goodness for the cabinet getting us some of that data. The final one is essentially cancer screening. What the proposal here is, can we get a hold of Medicaid claims data, identify patients who are eligible for screenings, whether it's colon cancer, lung cancer, cervical cancer, finding those patients and then deploying that similar software to reach out to them. And then can we take it a little bit further? This is a stretch on us. Can we take it a little bit further, integrate this AI system into our Epic scheduling system so that you're just going about your day, you get this phone call, you learn that, oh, I am due for colon cancer screening. What is colon cancer? Why am I at risk for this? What are the side effects? Okay, great. I want to get this colonoscopy. How do I do that? And we think that we can design an AI agent that walks you through the process and schedules you for your appointment all at the same time so that you don't then have to take the onus on yourself of calling your doctor and trying to get a colonoscopy, that we can just do it automatically, bring you in, and make sure that we are caring for the people of Kentucky. This was kind of a lot of stuff because I know that we were running over, but we do think that this is the most important part of our presentation, is this conversation back and forth. We hope that this is kind of the beginning of a conversation because we have a lot of ideas. We've got a stack of about 32 pages worth of proposals that we want to do, but we want to understand where the state thinks that we should be putting our time and attention. We've got dozens of students who are champing at the bit to make the next big thing, to do something impressive, to change the lives of the people in their hometowns. And so we want to know what's interesting to you. Again, thank you all so much for your time and for allowing us to come and present today.
Oh, Dr. Tomte, I could give you a couple hours and I would sit here, I think most of us would, and just listen. And we've so enjoyed just listening to the last couple months of what you all are doing at UK. And I think what you've articulated there is what gets me most excited, I think, about AI and healthcare, which is changing the lives of Kentuckians and moving the needle past just, are we talking about diagnosis? Are we talking about spending money? Are we getting people to the hospital? That's great. But if we're not changing their life and moving them to being actually better in health, we're not really moving the needle. So I'm really excited about some of the things you're talking about. I can't wait to read all the proposals. Does anybody have any specific, I'm sorry, Representative Miles, we'll start with you.
Hello. Thank you, Chairman. And this is not the first time that we have encountered Dr. Tay, so thank you so much for your presentation today. But I'm really curious what Dr. Ballard, I don't know if you all rode over here together, but what type of conversation takes place in the car with Dr. Tay going somewhere? Because, I mean, quite frankly, I would rather see you than a play or a dramatic theater or whatever, because so much information, but so fascinating, so excited to see what's next and what you all have to bring to us. But what type of conversation takes place in the car with him?
Representative Miles, thank you for the question. It's kind of akin to the guy that rides around with Superman and gets his cape ready and stuff. That's what I would tell. No, in all sincerity, we were actually talking about power usage of data centers the entire way over here and stuff. And I would, so this is regarding Mr. Cleland's talk. You know, I would actually give you the analogy that when you look at the data centers, that if you look at the NVIDIA chips, the DGX chip, which has 8 graphics processing units, and I was an electrical engineer before I went to medical school, by the way. And so if you look at one of those chips, it uses about the same amount of power as around 8 to 10 households in a year. And those data centers have, anywhere from 20 to 50,000, large data centers have 100,000 of those, those servers in them and stuff. So it's equivalent to a small city and stuff with 200,000 people in them and stuff is then. So that's what we were talking about on the way over here is the answer to your question. So
Thank you for being in Kentucky, both of you. Thank you for being here.
Co-Chair Bray.
Thank you. Always feel like a toddler after I listen to you all talk. So thanks for that. Very impressed with everything you're doing, and so super excited that it's not only happening, happening at all, but it's happening here in Kentucky. You asked for our feedback on what you all need to be focusing on. I mean, it sounds like you're doing an excellent job without our feedback, because everything you've talked about extremely important, and if you get it right, or let me rephrase that, when you get it right, it's going to save the state a ton of money just through the Medicaid system. And so we're extremely fortunate that you all have taken the onus upon yourself to do the research. I guess my question to you is, because you're the experts in all of this, I mean, I'm like I said, like a toddler up here. What do we need to be focused on? What can we do to help you all? Where can we go? What do we need to be looking at? Because you're the boots on the ground. You see this. You're training the students. You've got the feedback from the people that are developing the systems, and you know what direction it's going better than we do. I mean, I would love to just hear any advice, or where do we need to be looking, or how can we help?
So Thomas said this a couple of times during his presentation. In our space, it's all about, Representative Braid, thank you for the question. So the answer is it's all about access to data. And so for all of these different models that are decreasing, readmission to the hospital for heart failure, recognizing sepsis that, people are using in California and, that are saving money, they have access to good data. And, and Tama pointed out the importance of, in Kentucky, we need Kentucky's data regarding, you look at Medicaid claims, you look at the vaccine registry, those types of things. That's how we can make a difference, because for our models to work, we need access. Katie Thompson is an expert in data lakes, is what I would term it, in terms of large data sets and in putting them into the software that does the machine learning and helps improve and recognize, the patients that we can most benefit. And for us, it's access to data. And I think, the next question should be, how do we access that data and maintain security? We're both physicians. We know a lot about HIPAA. And so, making sure, so part of what we're doing is within Epic. Epic, the environment is very secure. It's well beyond what's needed for HIPAA compliance. And the other thing for Dr. Thompson, Katie, she has her own HIPAA protected servers that she utilizes for the data. She's actually utilized Medicaid data previously from the cabinet for, and so, this is, that's the next steps.
So just if I may follow up, your all's access to data, you said it takes about 6 months, and that's a lot better than other states. Can we streamline that and get it to you quicker, make it easier? Because, I mean, the onus is on us not only to improve the health outcomes for Kentuckians, and it's clear that what you're doing will improve that health outcomes for Kentuckians. And we need to make sure that if 6 months is great, but it'd be even better if we could do it in 3. Or direct access, or it sounds like we need to be putting some effort in looking at how we can improve that for you all.
I can't tell you how grateful I am that was your comment about how can we streamline it? How can we not accept 6 months as the benchmark? I think you're right. I think that there is a lot of opportunity. I think we at UK are also still trying to figure out how to get data in and out of places and make sure things are secure. And I do want to just say that, like he said, data privacy is our fundamental. We need to make sure that that's important. But we do think that there is a lot of things with remote patient monitoring, with these predictive analytics. There's a lot more things that we can be doing. And I won't go into kind of those details, but the truth of the matter is that this technology is so fresh and new that I'm not entirely sure I know what questions to ask for right now. Like, I don't know. We didn't think that we would have this opportunity to ask for something here. But if you don't mind, I'll come back to you as this goes on, because I anticipate over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to have more sophisticated understanding of truly the things that we can pull off. And if you are able to work with us, that we would love that.
Can I add to that just quickly? I think making this a dynamic conversation, that as we encounter opportunities where we think we can make a difference, if we can reach back out to you guys, Madam Chair.
100%. I think Representative Bray stole the question I was going to ask, is what do you need from us? I remember Cody Bumgard testified last year and talked about how important Kentucky's data was, that we don't want California, we don't want New York, we want Kentucky's data so we can better impact Kentuckians. And so we want this to be a dynamic conversation where you're talking to us about what we can do to streamline, provide better access to data more quickly. Whatever we need to do on our side, I think we want to be a good partner because time is money. And if we can provide better care for people and extend their life earlier while also reducing costs, that is something we are very much interested in. And being a front leader, I think, on those conversations because of a research capacity that we have is really exciting. I mean, especially if we have doctors who are willing to stay here. That's what we want. We don't want them going to New York. So you definitely have a willing partner, and the conversation is always open. Representative Lehman, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Quick question. Just I hear a lot of it. There's been a lot of federal cuts, NIH funding, other federal fundings and grants. How's your financial situation? And again, talking about keeping people here in Kentucky, it's going to be a budget year. I'm sure you have requests, but can you just let us know how that's going financially?
Yeah, I would say that, that's, thank you for the question, Representative Lehman. The budget, in terms of what we're doing with these projects, is we have everything we need to succeed, is our perspective on the budget. At the university level, that's beyond, I was actually on the board last year and stuff, and the budget's been approved. And I would tell you that our physical perspective at the university is, we're always concerned, given that the federal government has said over the next 10 years it's going to be, $900 billion in cuts. That definitely catches your attention, and it's a part of our onus for wanting to address these Medicaid costs and helping more Kentuckians, because we can save the state money and help everyone's budget. And so for us, it's truly what fuels us in terms of trying to make a difference.
Can I just ask a follow-up? I guess I'm more specific on, do you have federal grants that help subsidize some of the work you're doing or some of your researchers? And have you lost those grants? I'm just trying to understand if there's holes that need to be filled.
So no, the answer is no. We have not lost funding for anything that we're doing. We have internal grants, and that was frankly a part of our the significance of submitting to the State University Partnership is it's matching funds, and that's the intent of us working towards that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I think. Just to maximize on that, budget requests are important, and what we can do to help do some match funding or take on more research, I think that's really important, especially on the healthcare side. So I'll just mention at the end, thank you all for coming and giving us some things to think about. I hope you'll continue the conversation with us as we go into next year. And then lastly, I just want to know if we can also take that Tech 100 class. I'm somewhat getting somewhat honest.
I think that we are working on how do we get this out to people. We, like I said at the beginning of all of this, we do accept that responsibility that we are the ones who have the people around who can build things like this. And so we want to get it out. We want to get it out to our faculty, to our staff, and then out to the community at large. And so we'll keep you posted on that one.
Awesome. Thank you both very much for coming today and
Thank you
testifying
again.
and for your time. And then lastly, we have one more item on our agenda, and that is Senator Williams. If you want to talk a little bit about protecting personal information from AI scraping, you're welcome to do it from here or at the table.
Sorry. Okay, let me back up real quick. So essentially what this does is for AI scraping of government information only. Does not involve the private sector, does not involve any ability of anybody to come in and get data at the county clerk or the PVAs or whatever. What it is to do is to prevent AI from scraping personal information from the web on that. And to that extent, we add address of residence and personal phone number to the definition, the existing definition of personal information to prevent that. And we require the locals as well as the state to have a policy about what they publish on the internet for scraping. Some of this, I mean, it just seems to make sense that your personal address is personal information. The other thing that's not as intuitive is that your picture these days is also a biometric that can be used by AI if it's associated with your name to go out there and scrape a lot of other information. So that also is added on here, is that you cannot publish without somebody's permission their picture, their address, their phone number on that. That's just clearly is what we want to do. Anybody can ask any questions on that, but you can have it behind what is defined as a secure internet system right now, like PVAs. When I go up there, you can get everything about you and your address, your home. Right now, some of them allow anybody to go in there and just get it, which an AI bot can do. But a lot of them have it behind a firewall, okay, or behind a password, right? That would be okay. I think in the future we might say it's got to be a certain level of security for that password, such as it's got to have third-party or multi-factor authentication. But that's what the policy is about, for the local governments to establish a policy. COT has a policy, and this will say that's the base policy for all these local governments. There may be some comments. I think it will be something that is going to have to be phased in over a few years on this, and I think beyond this, we're looking at training for local officials. We met with the Ohio Cyber Center, Senator Nemes and I did a couple of days ago. We're going to Georgia. So there's a lot more to this, but this is just focused on AI information and government publication of data. Any questions?
Yes, Senator Thomas.
Senator Williams, let me first say that I always enjoy the questions you ask on this task force. I mean, I'm always clued in to the questions that you ask. When you're talking about scraping, maybe I had a different idea than what you were articulating just now. Are you talking about scraping in terms of information gathering and collection, as opposed to scraping in terms of eliminating or extinguishing? Because it sounds like to me what you're talking about is you want to stop AI from gathering information about your personal address or your age or where you work, as opposed to eliminating AI from having those uses. Am I correct?
I'm not. This is not.
Talking about eliminating.
This is not restricting AI or AI bots. What this is individuals have to give personal information to the government.
Right.
On our government
such as
sites.
our address or our age.
Our name, our address, all sorts of stuff. Some of that personal information is already prohibited from publication. It is not prohibited from internal use, from secure password access. But one of the things that isn't prohibited right now is your address and your phone number, okay? You have to give that to the government. The government publishes it and a number of on a web. And so an AI bot can scrape that and get that information about where you live, okay? And so we're not saying they can't. That AI bot's still out there scraping commercial information, scraping other things. We're not stopping that. But I have a choice on whether I'm going to allow a commercial provider to publish some of my information. I give it to them. I don't have a choice on whether I can give the government
I understand what you
information.
mean by scraping now. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
Okay.
I understand what you mean by scraping.
Scraping. Crawling the web. Yeah, if you have arachnophobia, I could give you a description that would make your skin crawl. But anyway, we use some buzzwords. Thank you very much. Sorry for the buzzwords.
Okay, I don't think we have any more conversation about that item. If you are interested, please reach out to Senator Williams, as he's got a draft bill of that legislation for this coming year.
Yes.
All right. Well, with that, we will stand adjourned. The next meeting is October 9th at 9 a.m. Thank you very much.